Brother Mazin Qumsiyeh, welcome to the Afghanistan podcast.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Jazakallah, thank you. Brother, my team has been in talks with you for some time now to arrange this episode. In the course of this period, you have been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and I'm extremely happy for you. But also, I know you're a very busy man. You're already working over 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I kind of could tell that with this Nobel Peace Prize nomination, your time is going to have even more demands on it. So I asked my team to get in touch with you to ask if it's a problem we can cancel or delay, and we will understand. But you've been very generous, and you said let's go ahead. So thank you for this, and I'm really honored to be here talking to you today.
Thank you.
So Mazin, you're speaking to us from West Bank, yes? Bethlehem?
Yes, from Bethlehem, birthplace of Jesus, Prophet
Amazing.
Isa alayhi salam.
Amazing. Can I just ask, so we currently are in a period of this ceasefire in Gaza. How do you feel, how resilient is that ceasefire going to be? How enduring will it be?
Well, I am one of 15 million Palestinians in the world. 8.5 million of us are refugees or displaced people, and that's before the displacement that's happened in Gaza, where nearly 2 million Palestinians, 70% of them are already refugees, were forced to leave their homes, which were then demolished, or they were demolished on top of them. So we Palestinians, of course, endured 76 years of the most horrific apartheid colonial regime that has ever faced humanity. But sometimes difficulties make you more resilient, and I think I watch what's happening in Gaza now as the people, 300,000 of them returned to Gaza, North Gaza already, to a place which had no homes basically left there. Their homes are demolished, and yet they insisted on going back to that land where they were born and raised. So this kind of resilience is inspiring to each of us. I mean, we support each other, we inspire each other, but it's also inspiring to all humanity when they see, people, carrying all their belongings that they can manage to carry and moving from one place to another under constant shelling and bombardment, and still manage to survive. At least 95% of them, 5% are already gone. But this is resilience, and it's something to be proud of, I think.
You're so right. To be honest, normally I don't talk about the resilience of the Palestinian people because it's absolutely there, but at the same time, I don't want people to take that for granted and kind of undermine the trials and tribulations that are going on in Palestine. But at the same time, when we do see the resilience of the Palestinian people just going through so much hardship, but yet with smiles on their face and glowing faces, I don't know how that happens. I think it's something in the land. It's a blessed land.
Well, I mean, I say we don't have the luxury of despair. What is, if we have despair,
Yeah.
what are we going to do? Commit suicide? It's a difficult life, no matter what. And you love your country to the point where you are willing to die here rather than leave your country or you leave your place of residence.
Yeah.
Because we have had our people lived here for thousands of years, of course, since humans migrated out of Africa around 150,000 years ago. Palestine has always been inhabited by people, and these are our progenitors, our ancestors, and we really feel even our biology, even our physique is connected to the air here, to the land here, to the soil, to the food that we grow. We were, by the way, this is part of the Fertile Crescent, as you know, that humans first developed agriculture, first domesticated plants and animals, one thing going from hunter-gatherer communities to settled communities. And this happened here about 12,000 years ago. And since then, we had those settled communities like Jerusalem, Ursalim in Aramaic, the original name for it, and Jericho, Yariha, which is an area that has been inhabited again for 11,500 years or so, continuous inhabitation. So these people, our people, are connected to this land in a way that only indigenous people, like people, any indigenous people on earth, any country, if you look for indigenous people and you see how Native Americans, for example, were, or how Aboriginal people in Australia are connected to the land,
Yeah.
this is a connectivity that's hard to break. And colonialists, that's for them the biggest obstacle to success is the connectivity of the colonized people, the indigenous people to the land.
Martin, before this episode started, before you came aboard, this is exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking Palestine is a historic land. The people living there have been living there since beginning of time, really. And the Zionists, the claims that they make that this land belongs to them, is a morally bankrupt claim. Is legally has no standing. It's just from a point of common sense is stupid. But putting all of that to one side, when we look at the claim that Zionists make that this land belongs to them, what kind of a claim is that? Is that a claim based on religion? Are they saying the land belongs to people who have the faith, the Jewish faith, or are they saying it's a genetic claim that people genetically from their ancestors are the ones? Because those are two different things, the religious and the genetic. What are they actually saying?
Yeah, I mean, Palestine, as I said, was the first, from the Fertile Crescent, when first cities were built in this Fertile Crescent, which stretches on the areas of Iraq and Iran all the way through Syria and Lebanon and Palestine. That's a Fertile Crescent, and people have lived here continuously. Now, religions, of course, many religions pass through this region.
Yeah.
From the pagan traditions and, Zoroastrian and others, and other religions that are still here, Baha'i and many others, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Palestine and the whole Fertile Crescent, basically, was always multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and multilingual even. In Palestine, there were 44 languages spoken before 1948. This diversity is same to the diversity of Aboriginal people in Australia, what became known as Australia, of course, and what became known as the United States. There was diversity of people. Now, in terms of religions, of course, there is three religions, monotheistic religions that are important, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that considers Islam the holy land for them because their religions are associated with it. For example, Islam, we have the third holiest site for Islam in Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, where Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven according to Islamic traditions. We have the birthplace of Jesus here in Bethlehem, where I am. So my family is Christian, for example. And we have Judaism also. These are people of this land acquired different. Now, the idea of Zionism is totally unrelated to these issues of people living on their land. It's the same as the idea of Crusaderism. Crusaderism was an idea among some Christians in Europe who thought it's a good idea to leave Europe and come and settle here, colonize this area, and force everybody off the land or butcher them and create a quote unquote Catholic state, Christian state. This is the idea of colonialism. This was rejected by the local people, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, by the way. My family is, for example, Christian, and we fought with the Muslim against the Crusaders. So it's not about religion, it's just somebody used religion to justify colonialism and conquest for the sake of material good. That's what Zionists do. Zionists use the idea that Judaism has a root here as a religion, not as a people, by the way. European Jews are Europeans. Ethiopian Jews are Ethiopian. Yemeni Jews are Yemenite. Iranian Jews are Iranian. Genetically, I'm talking about. As a medical geneticist, I know what I'm talking about. But you don't have to be a geneticist, by the way, to tell that a Yemeni Jew is actually Yemeni, not related to people from Palestine, be it Jews, Christians, or Muslims in Palestine. We, the original people, are here. So it was using religion to justify conquest and justify ethnic cleansing and justify genocide, which we are witnessing now in Gaza in very large scale.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode. Yeah. I have guests on this podcast, quite often military experts, when we talk about the conflict going on in Gaza. And when we talk about the current ceasefire that's there, a number of guests have expressed concerns that the Zionist state has a history of wheedling out of any peace treaties, and actually they have a history of trying to assassinate the negotiators for peace or for ceasefires. So with that history in mind, how likely do you think it is that the ceasefire will continue?
I'm sorry, your voice I cannot hear very well. Can you speak louder?
I'm so sorry.
Come closer to the microphone.
I'm so sorry. Let me just get a bit closer. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. So I was saying that, so a number of my guests have expressed concerns that the Zionist state has a history of weaseling out of ceasefires, deals, negotiations, and actually they have a history of trying to assassinate peacekeepers, peacemakers, negotiators. So with that in mind, how likely do you think this ceasefire is to continue? And a lot of my guests have raised concerns that maybe the next step for the Zionist state will be to try to now turn its attention towards the West Bank to annex more land from there. What do you think, living in the West Bank?
Well, I'm also, in addition to being a biologist and a medical geneticist, I'm an amateur historian. I like to read history and study history and judge on things based on history, whether the history of the Zionists or history of other colonial powers. If we take the United States, for example, the European colonizers came to North America. They slowly took it over, as you know, started in the East Coast and spread to the West Coast, and then to Hawaii and Puerto Rico and other areas. And they made over 300 quote unquote peace agreements with the indigenous people of the US of North America at the time. They broke every single one of those agreements. That's typical of colonizers. Colonizers have a goal, and it's very clear. You don't have to be a scientist to understand what their goal is. They want a land without the people. That's it. So they want the land. They don't want the indigenous people. They don't even want the land as it was. They even reshape its ecology. They bring invasive species. They destroy indigenous trees. They change river courses. They want to recreate something they left in Europe. That's where most colonizers come from in history. So that's indeed what they try to do, is reshape the country. And that's their goal. And their goal is very, very clear, and it's not ambiguous. The tactics of signing ceasefire or not signing a ceasefire, these are tactics. And they will do it interim when they feel they have to do it. But once the conditions are ripe again, they want to do more ethnic cleansing and more genocide. This is typical of all colonialists, be it Europeans in what became Australia or New Zealand, or what became the United States, or all of Latin America, all of the world, actually. The Europeans were in every country on earth. South Africa with the Dutch and the British colonizers. They didn't want South Africa with the Zulus. They wanted the Zulus stuck in what's called Bantustans, and that's it. And they want them out of the way so that they can take the rest of the land, the good lands, the water, the gold mines, everything else. The same with the Zionist colonizers. It's totally understandable. And I analyze things, as I said, in an objective way, not necessarily good, bad, or evil. I just think, you can analyze things as they are presented, as you have the data for them and what happened. So to answer your question about this particular ceasefire, I really don't know. There's a 50-50 chance that Netanyahu will go back to war after he claims victory by releasing some of the prisoners of war that Hamas has taken and releasing some Palestinians, and go back and rearrest those Palestinians, because that has happened in the past. They make deals and they break them. If they have the power, and might makes right, as in his logic and the logic of the government of the Zionist movement.
Martin, I think it is amazing that being in the situation that your people are, how you can have such like an objective view, but also a broader view where you're not just looking at the situation in Palestine, but you're also concerned about freedom struggles, whether it's Latin America, what happened in South Africa or New Zealand, Australia. And I think that kind of objective analysis it gives a person clarity, and it also kind of helps understand things a lot better. So when I listen to you talk, it is very kind of heartening in a way, because when you see things in a bigger picture, things make a bit more sense. With that in mind, why do you think the regional powers there's support for the Palestinian people, and even amongst the people in the world, but also amongst a number of governments, whether it's European, in Spain, South Africa, Latin America, a lot of states have come up and spoken really kind of strongly for the Palestinian people. But you don't really see that support in the region. Why is that? Like, why are regional countries, are they not bothered about what's happening in Palestine, or do they actively want to suppress the Palestinian people?
Yes, this is, I traveled to 45 countries, and as I said, I can make generalizations about behaviors of colonizers around the world based on this. And even today, the US is still trying to be a bigger colonizer, and they're talking about taking over Canada and Greenland and the Panama Canal and so on. Expansionist. And Israel is the same thing, talking about taking over. They're already in South Syria and in parts of Lebanon. And of course, 1/3 of the Sinai is essentially under their control. But you can make these generalizations, and they're logical, and you can bring evidence for them. But there is something unique about Palestine, which is precisely what you pointed out to. This is the first genocide, for example, in human history that is not perpetrated by one government. It's perpetrated by many governments, including the US government, the British government, the French government, the German government, the Australian government, who literally not just support, say, good for you, go commit genocide. They actually participate in the genocide with their weapons, with their personnel, even with their intelligence, with their protection of Israel at the international courts and at the UN and so forth. This is very unusual in world history of genocides, and we had lots of genocides in our human history. Now, to explain this, you have to explain it based on the presence of a very strong Zionist lobbies in those countries. This is also very clear and easily demonstrated with evidence and documents about who gets, for example, the US government now, doesn't matter whether it's, they have every 4 years, they may have a quote unquote peaceful transfer of authority, but it's peaceful transfer between one Zionist puppet and another Zionist puppet. Like in this case with Biden to Trump. Both of them are beholden to the Zionists and cannot go against the Zionist wishes. This is because of a very strong lobby. We have to really respect how strong this lobby is around Western countries, especially, facilitated by mostly Jewish individuals who are supportive of Israel and Zionism, but also some Christian, quote unquote, Zionists, even though I think you cannot be a Christian and a Zionist at the same time if you really follow the teachings of Jesus. Well, there are also some Muslim Zionists, but anyways, it's a irrationality in my humble opinion. But that's what we have, and unfortunately, they also have a strong influence on the media and on the levers of powers like corporations like Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, or Elon Musk and others who are Zionists at their core, and they want to support Israel, come right or wrong, and so we face a big challenge on that front to develop an agenda for human rights or for justice or for peace. Instead, what we have is an agenda that is dominated by power dynamics and money and resources that are directed towards destruction and wars. And also, by the way, infecting our climate with climate change and so forth, destroying our planet, this capitalist greed that allows people to just keep burning fossil fuels and profit from them. And there's big corporations who are making big money from wars, like Halliburton and General Electrics and so forth. And even the technology companies like Google and Microsoft, who have also been infiltrated by Zionists, who helped Israel with artificial intelligence to commit genocide. Israel is the first country on earth to actually use artificial intelligence and the best technology to commit genocide.
Yeah, shameful and it's disastrous. Mazin, also you're a physicist, you're a historian, you're a university professor. I don't know how you do all of these things, and also on top of that, you're a director. So, Mazin, I was saying you're a physician, you're a historian, you're a university professor. You wear so many different hats. On top of that, you're also director in Bethlehem Museum for Biodiversity. I wanted to ask, what is the state of biodiversity in Palestine?
Well, I consider all of this to be the same. I mean, when you think about, even when I'm in medical genetics, it's about healing people. When you think about biodiversity, it's also about protecting people, because people cannot live without nature.
Yeah.
And if nature is destroyed, if we have climate change and habitat destruction and pollution and wars, then people cannot survive. So my mission in life for the past 50 years, really, since I became really aware of situations, has been to have sustainable human and natural communities. That's the thread that binds all of these things together: sustainable human and natural communities. And you have to have that. If we don't have that, we're doomed. We're doomed to endless conflict and wars. And I don't say we shouldn't even say endless now, because of the development of technologies like nuclear weapons, hydrogen bombs, and laser technologies that could obliterate whole cities, and climate change that's going to cause. I mean, already we see it here with temperature rising 2 degrees above average in the past 20 years, and it's going to double. And rainfall has dropped already by 20%, could drop by 40% in the next 2 decades. And we see fires in California, and we see hurricanes and tornadoes increasing. All of these things are about removing sustainability of people and nature. And they are due to that greed, that colonial mentality of getting more money, more resources at the expense of people and nature. So our job, my job, and your job, and everybody's job, is to challenge that, to challenge greed, challenge colonialism, work for sustainability of people and nature. This is our job, and it's my mission in life. So it's not many missions, it's this one mission. Of course, how to do it, I can do it through environmental work, through climate change work, through human rights work, through many kind of tools that we use to achieve that end result of sustainability.
Also, Mazin, when we look at this current phase of the conflict, what's going on between Israel and Hamas, but not just that, but also between Hezbollah, Yemen, Iran, all of these things. When I look at all of this, it's difficult for me to see once all of this is over, because at some stage it has to be over. Even if it's not fixed, it has to subdue. But at that point, what are things likely to look like? Because surely it can't go back to how things were previous to October 2023, because in some ways Israel has lost the sense of security that they had before that attack in October and before the attacks from Yemen, Hezbollah, Iran. Israel now has to understand that it has to live in the community, in the region. It has to live as equals, because its actions will have consequences. How do you think, if we look ahead, what do you see, even before getting to a final solution? What's the interim likely to look like from now until that point?
Well, the blind spot of all colonialists, no matter how successful or unsuccessful they are, colonialists in France and Algeria was not that successful, except in killing 2 million Algerian lives. Colonialists in Australia were more successful and killed a lot of native people. But they all have one blind spot. All colonialists have the same blind spot. That blind spot assumes that killing and maiming and torturing indigenous people will cause them somehow to surrender their country and give up on their country. This is a blind spot they cannot seem to transcend. And Zionist colonizers are no different. They think that the more you beat the Palestinians, the more you can get their land and the more you can succeed. Well, the evidence is overwhelmingly against that, historically, even in our case. I mean, I ask even Zionists that I debate with sometimes, I ask them, show me one incident where you killed leadership of a resistance group where you actually got a more accommodating leadership, or leadership that says, hey, I'm giving up and I'm going away.
Yeah.
No, it gets actually worse year after year, decade after decade, because that's also basic social ideas and phenomena that are well understood. You kill some people. For example, Israel killed, there's some, minimum number, 50,000 Palestinians in Gaza in the last 15 months. And there are some people talking about 200 to 300,000 Palestinians who were killed. But anyway, whatever the number is, if we take even the minimal number of 50,000,
Yeah.
an injury of 110,000, well, the injured people, they have relatives. The killed people, they have relatives.
Yeah.
What are these relatives going to think? Hey, they killed us, or they killed my brother and sister, so I should just give up and raise a white flag.
Yeah.
No, that's illogical. But as I said, it's a blind spot among all colonialists. They assume that that's what will happen. For some reason, they keep thinking that that's what would happen. And the lessons keep coming back to them over and over again. I mean, what is Hezbollah? Hezbollah was formed 1982 or something when Israel invaded Lebanon.
Yeah.
Hezbollah didn't exist before that. So the invasion is what caused the creation of a resistance. Not the invasion suppressed the potentiality of resistance for the future. The same thing in Hamas. Hamas was created in 1988, 87, during the uprising that we had when Rabin told his soldiers to break the bones of Palestinian children who participate in peaceful demonstrations. This is typical of colonialist miscalculations.
Yeah.
And I think they miscalculated on the issue of the front. They don't like us to use the term the resistance front or resistance groups, of course. They want to consider any opposition to them to be terrorist, of course. It doesn't matter, of course. The Europeans in North America considered the Native Americans as savages and barbarians and terms like that. But ultimately, they applied that term to all of the Native Americans and all of the Aboriginal Australians or all of the Zulus in South Africa. Any Palestinian is really a terrorist by Zionist definition, because we are living on our land and we are insisting on living on our land. So we are in opposition to this colonial idea. And if you are in opposition to an idea that is carried by one person, it is, of course, logical that that person will label you in the most negative and most unfair, if you want, terminology. But it is logical, again, not good, bad, or evil, but that's how colonialists think. It's like saying, mosquitoes suck some blood. So what does that mean? Mosquitoes are evil and humans are good? No, it's the nature of the beast, the nature of the individual, the nature. The nature of colonialists is to kill indigenous people, take their land, and label them in the worst possible scenario possible. So that's logical. And the nature of the indigenous people is that they want to stick to their land, they want to resist, and they consider that good, and they consider any success of resistance to be a fairly good thing. So that's, again, expected and understandable when you make the right diagnosis of a colonial, anti-colonial struggle. Now, if you make the wrong diagnosis and you say, well, this is somehow a dispute, for example, about religion, about the gods, or that this is somehow a military occupation, and that there is resistance to the military occupation. It's not the same. I mean, military occupation is not the same as colonialism. A military occupation is like when France was occupied by Germany in the World War II. That is different than colonial settling population that wants to displace the local people.
Martin, how is life in Bethlehem on a daily basis? Sitting outside from Palestine, I often think, what are people doing right now on a daily basis?
Well, I mean, Bethlehem is certainly better than Gaza. At least we don't have our homes demolished on top of our heads, or F-15s that are bombing us, with 2,000-ton bombs supplied by the United States. But certainly the whole West Bank exists as ghettos or concentration camps, and Bethlehem is one of those ghettos. It's surrounded by Israeli walls and checkpoints and gates, which are mostly closed. Now, as we speak, there are over 800 checkpoints or gates that are closed in the West Bank, closing Palestinians from normal movement, even from one ghetto to the nearby ghetto, to the one right next to it. So it's really terrible situation in terms of freedom of movement, in terms of the economy. Of course, Bethlehem, for example, is dependent on tourism, religious tourism, and we've had 2 Christmases already without religious tourists from abroad. We used to get 3 million tourists a year. Now it's pretty much shut down. And so you can imagine how that impacts the local economy, like the hotels, the restaurants, the souvenir shops are all shuttered, and people are out of work. So the economy is very bad. And then you have anybody who manages to venture out of the ghetto outside of the Bethlehem district into other areas subject to being attacked by settlers. I mean, in one case, a person from Hebron who was in Bethlehem, he was even burned by the settlers in his car. So it is what it is. You have settlers, colonial settlers, supported by the army, of course, all of them racist to the core. I mean, they consider Palestinians as not human, not even subhuman. They consider us like cockroaches, and they actually label us as such. I mean, even the president of Israel said we should deny them food, water, medicine, whatever, because we're dealing with human animals. That's a description they used. The Minister of Defense said the same thing. It's a colonial mentality. I mean, in North America, they used for the indigenous people, they used to just say Indians are like animals. You can kill them, scalp them, kill their women and children. They usually even take the babies and throw them against rocks and stuff like that, because they don't think of them as humans. In the same way, the Israeli Zionists who are committed to Zionism do not think of me as a fellow human being with different point of view. No, they think of me as they said many times also, like, you come to a field and you want to plant it, and these are thorns or rocks. They have to be removed, It's as simple as that. Even Ben Gurion said we have to spirit them outside the country. I mean, and Ben Gurion said the same thing. There's no space in this country for both of us. They have to go. So we have to kill them or kick them out.
It's absolutely disgusting. I mean, yes, we talk about like the injustices that have happened in other places in the past, whether it was like Native Americans or New Zealand, Australia, Aborigines. But surely one would expect that now humanity has moved on, and also now what's happening in Palestine is happening in front of everyone's, in front of the cameras. We can all sit and see what's happening, and it's completely disgusting. And it's disgusting to see our countries, kind of the government support them. I think it's disheartening, depressing, because people around the world have sympathy for the Palestinian people. but our own governments are in cahoots with this Zionism going on, with the racism and genocide that's taking place on a daily basis. So it is, at times, it is very disheartening for people to think, what can we do, and what we're doing, is it making any difference? So what would you say to the people on the street around the world who have support for the Palestinian people in their hearts, and they're trying to raise their voices when they can, but obviously their governments aren't there to work for the desires of their own people?
Well, the last colonial power that began to crumble was South Africa, actually, when it changed from an apartheid colonial regime to having one person, one vote, even though there is still economic apartheid in South Africa. But how did that happen with support from the international community? The international community engaged in boycott, divestment, sanctions. They engaged in media work. They engaged in lobbying their governments. They engaged in all sorts of activities of demonstrations, etc. So there are lots of things that people can do. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, our challenge is a little bigger because we have a Zionist lobby around the world, and especially in Western countries, but also even in some developing countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. But anyways, this lobby makes it a bit more difficult, but still the methodology is the right methodology. If I use my medical background to say, it's like having a disease. If you have a disease, let's say COVID-19 or another viral disease, your most important asset is your immune system to resist it. That's the resistance, the local resistance in Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, and other places where Israel is extending its influence. But if you had the flu or something, people tell you, take vitamin C, take whatever other zinc in COVID-19 or chicken soup or whatever. This helps. The support from outside helps. And indeed it does. And so we say that support from outside is what's coming and what's growing around the world. We saw the demonstrations, millions of people. I mean, in Yemen alone, there were like 6 million people in one demonstration. So I think you can see that globally, in support of human rights for Palestinians and in support of or against the colonial hegemonic structure. We need just more of this, and we need to intensify it, and we need to think outside the box. And there's already people thinking outside the box around the world, and so forth. And I think this is happening using social media now to reach hundreds of millions of people with TikToks and Instagram and so forth. I mean, TikToks, why does the US want to ban TikTok? It's not because it's China company. What does that got to do? I mean, one could say China should ban Facebook because it's an American company. Well, maybe they should. I don't know. But anyways, it's not about the ownership. It's about TikTok allowing people to post videos.
Yeah.
And people are exposing what's happening in Gaza with the genocide. And there's a lot of Americans who are getting their news now from TikToks and Facebook and other places, not from the mainstream media that's controlled by the Zionists.
Mazin, thank you so much for your time. Before you go, I want to ask you one last question. I really appreciate the time you've given me. I'm sure this interview is going to be seen by a lot of people in Pakistan. Pakistani people love the Palestinians. Pakistan has never accepted, the state has never accepted the state of Israel. And there's a lot of sympathy for the people in Palestine. But also, I see a lot of parallels between what's happening in Kashmir and what's happening in Palestine, not just to the people, but also to to the forces, whether Israel is learning from India and India is learning from Israel on a daily basis. I see there's weapons from India being supplied to Israel, and Israel is teaching India how to assassinate leaders, Kashmiri leaders around the world and in Kashmir. So it's a lot of the same kind of going on. Do you have any words for the people in Kashmir?
Yeah, this is very important. One time I was invited to speak in Mumbai. Hundreds of people from poor people and the people who are considered the lower caste, so to speak, the untouchables, as I used to call them, and attended. And I was wondering, at that this many years ago, I asked the guy who invited me, why do you want to care about Palestinians? And you know what he said to me? He said, you know this guy Modi that's in India? I said, yeah. He said, do you know who his golf buddy is? It's Netanyahu.
Yeah,
So, so the elites in the world, it doesn't matter what their religion is, by the way, the
yeah,
elites that are profiting, that are making money off of the misery of millions of people, uh, get rich together. They go meet at Davos, for example, to decide how to destroy us even more. Those are one group, basically, whether it's Trump or Netanyahu or Biden or Orban in Hungary or the guy now, president of Argentina, I forget his name, right-wing nutcase who is emulating Trump. These people do not care about their own people. They don't care about, in the case of India, really. I mean, he uses Hinduism, but he's really not, it's not about religion. It's about profit and money and power. And they use religions and they bash other religions. And in the case of Trump, immigrants or Muslims or whatever. It's just a tool for him. He's not religious. He doesn't care one way or the other.
yeah,
He had like 3 wives or 4 wives. I don't know. But anyways, he's not interested in those things other than using them as tools. And I think the same thing applies in this case. It's a very sad situation. For example, the situation of Kashmir,
yeah,
the situation of destruction of mosques and
yeah,
things like that that's happening in India. Again, it is not about, lacking a place to worship their gods
yeah,
or whatever. It's about power struggles and dynamics of greed and stupidity. Mahatma Gandhi actually diagnosed it very well. And, one time he fasted, refused to eat, and I said, I might die as well if these Hindus, nationalists, don't abandon the way they are thinking.
mm,
But they forgot about the message of Mahatma Gandhi, and they forgot about the message of Khan, who was a Muslim leader of Indian resistance against the British. It's a sad situation globally. I think the message we should take from all of this, us, the common people, not the billionaires, the common people, the message we should take is that our struggles are the same. Our struggles are one. It's not that you have a struggle in, let's say, Pakistan or India or whatever, or Iran, and I have my struggle here in Palestine. No, it's one struggle because our enemy is one and the same. Our enemy are those guys who are fraternizing with each other and who are trying to destroy our planet. So that's why we have to work hard together, because together we have strength. And they want to divide us. They want us to pit Mexican Americans against other Americans. They want to pit Muslims against Christians, against Jews, against whatever, because that's how they benefit, is divide and conquer. That's a policy of all colonialists.
yes. Marvin, I said last question, one very last question. You were abroad in America. You've taught in American universities. You've returned to Palestine. It must mean that you have hope for the future. What do you see the future of Palestine?
I mean, I was working in the US for human rights and for the environment anyway, and I came here because I thought I could make a bigger difference on the ground here. Um, and I was hopeful always. My whole life I've been hopeful about humans changing their course when they are going the wrong way, because I believe every human being, like they sometimes say, you have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other shoulder, and each is whispering in your ears. You have to listen to your angel. So I've always believed that there's that goodness in humans and that we can tap into that to change this disastrous course that the few individuals who are listening to their devils are engaged in. And this is where my life's mission is: education, education, education to people, as I'm doing now with your show also, is engaged in education so that people are aware of what's going on, people understand the connectivity of our struggles, and understand what it takes to change the dynamics to arrive at what? Arrive at happiness, what everybody wants, which is a peaceful life, good life, good food without destroying our environment, without eating the poisons that they are feeding us. Mentally and physically, by the way, they're feeding us poison.
Exactly. Mazin, how do people follow you? I get your newsletters and they're amazing to read. How can people join your newsletters and your website?
So I would love for your audience to connect with us. They can email me at info@palestinenature.org. Palestinenature.org is our website. It's one word, Palestine Nature. And I'm happy to connect with them and explain to them more, put them on our email list to receive reports from the ground here in Palestine, in Gaza, and the West Bank, and the rest of Palestine.
Thank you so much. I will also include that in the notes so people will be able to click and get straight to it. I really appreciate your time, and it's so inspiring just listening to you talk and also talking about unity, and not just talking about what's happening in Palestine, but talking about the oppressed people everywhere. You're an amazing person, and may God help you in your cause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.